Jake Miller's hands were black with engine grease when the attorney walked into his shop. The man looked completely out of place on Station Epsilon 7, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Jake earned in a year. Most people who came to the lower decks wore patches on their patches. This guy looked like he'd never seen dirt in his life. "You're Jake Miller?" the attorney asked, holding a tablet like it might contaminate him. Jake wiped his hands on his already filthy coveralls. "Yeah. What did I do?" "Nothing. Your uncle passed away 3 weeks ago. You're his only living relative." Jake barely remembered Uncle Tom. The old man had been a freelance cartographer, always chasing maps and legends across the galaxy. They'd met maybe twice when Jake was a kid. "Okay. So what? He left me debts." The attorney's expression was weird. Almost nervous. "No. He left you something else. It's in Bay 12. The code is already transferred to your account." He handed Jake the tablet and practically ran back to the clean levels of the station. Jake stood there, confused. Bay 12 was one of the cargo storage areas. What could Uncle Tom possibly have stored there? He found out an hour later. The creature inside the cargo pod was the size of a small transport shuttle. Pure white scales covered its body, and massive wings were folded against its sides. It looked like the ancient Earth legends of dragons, except this thing was real and absolutely massive. Red eyes glared at him with what could only be described as pure hatred. "What the hell?" Jake whispered. The information packet explained it was called a Velkathos, an ancient alien species. Rare. Incredibly valuable. And apparently now his problem. There was a single message from Uncle Tom: "Keep him safe. Trust no one. He's the key to everything." That was it. No other explanation. Jake tried talking to it. The dragon just stared at him like he was an annoying insect. For 3 days, Jake came to the cargo bay with food. The creature ate everything, expensive protein slabs that ate through Jake's savings, but never said a word. Just radiated contempt from the corner of the pod. Jake moved him to his apartment on the 4th day. It was stupid, but keeping something this valuable in a cargo bay was asking for trouble. His apartment was barely big enough for himself, let alone a dragon the size of a cargo hauler. The creature squeezed into the corner and glared at everything. "Look, I don't know what my uncle was thinking," Jake said, "but we're stuck together. You got a name?" Silence. "Great. Real talkative. More silence. Fine. I'll call you Ash. You know, because you're white and look like you're made of ash." The dragon's eye twitched, but he said nothing. On the 6th day, everything went wrong. Jake was under a transport speeder, fixing a busted converter, when he noticed them. 3 figures moving through his shop, checking corners. They weren't customers. They moved like hunters. Like military. Their eyes scanned everything with the kind of focus that meant they were looking for something specific. Or someone. Jake's heart hammered. He quietly rolled out from under the speeder, grabbed his toolkit and slipped through the back door. His apartment was 3 levels up. If they tracked Ash here, he had maybe 5 minutes. He made it in 3. "We're leaving now," Jake said. Ash looked at him with those unblinking red eyes but didn't move. "I'm serious. There are people coming and I don't think they want to chat." Still nothing. Jake did what he did best, he improvised. His apartment was connected to the station's maintenance tunnels. He'd used them 100 times to scavenge parts. He triggered a false heat signature using a welding torch in the bathroom, rigged it to move on a timer. Then he pulled open the maintenance hatch. "Come on, big guy. Unless you want to meet whoever's hunting you." That got a reaction. Ash moved, squeezing his massive body through the hatch. Jake followed, sealing it behind them. The tunnels were tight. Jake knew them well, but navigating with a dragon the size of a transport was different. He could hear footsteps above them. Multiple sets. They were searching his apartment now. Jake led Ash deeper into the station's guts, through passages most people didn't know existed. He'd spent years exploring these tunnels, finding shortcuts and hidden spaces. Now that knowledge might save both their lives. They reached an old shipping container Jake had converted into storage. It was buried behind 3 other containers in a forgotten section of the cargo hold. He keyed it open. Now. Ash squeezed inside. Jake followed and sealed the door. They waited in silence. Jake's heart pounded so hard he thought it might give them away. He could hear the hunters searching, their footsteps echoing through the metal corridors. They were systematic. Professional. Getting closer. Then they were right outside. Jake held his breath. Through a crack in the container, he could see 3 figures with advanced scanners. Military-grade equipment. They swept the area once. Twice. One of them stopped right in front of their container. Jake's hand went to the plasma cutter in his belt. Not much of a weapon, but it was all he had. That's when Ash spoke for the first time. His voice sounded like metal grinding against stone. Your kind is stupidly brave. Fine. I'll tell you why they want me dead. Jake Miller's dreams were interrupted by a sound he'd never heard before. His mother was screaming. Not the tired, frustrated screaming that happened when bills came due or when the landlord threatened eviction. This was different. This was pure terror. He bolted upright in bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. The alarm clock read 6:15 in the morning. Tuesday. School day. But something was very wrong. Mom? Jake stumbled out of his tiny bedroom, still wearing yesterday's clothes. He'd been too tired to change after visiting Ash last night with the leftovers from dinner. His mother stood frozen in front of their old television, her hand covering her mouth. The coffee mug she'd been holding lay shattered on the floor, brown liquid spreading across the cracked linoleum. She didn't even notice. Jake looked at the screen and his legs nearly gave out. Every news channel showed the same impossible image. The sky above their town, above their entire region, was completely black. Not storm clouds. Not smoke. Ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships, arranged in perfect patterns that stretched from horizon to horizon. They hung there in the dawn light, motionless and silent, like a second sky made of metal and darkness. The news anchor's voice was shaking. We're receiving reports that approximately 20,000 unidentified vessels have appeared in Earth's atmosphere. The president has declared a state of emergency. Military forces worldwide are on high alert. We repeat, this is not a drill. 20,000 unknown craft have entered our airspace and are holding position above major population centers. Jake's phone exploded with notifications. Text messages. Emergency alerts. His classmates flooding group chats with panic and confusion. The screen was a blur of all caps messages and fear. But Jake wasn't thinking about any of that. His mind had locked onto one single thought. The creature's scales that shifted colors. Those impossibly intelligent golden eyes. The way it had purred when Jake brought it leftover chicken last night, stronger than before, healing faster than should be possible. Oh no, Jake whispered. Oh no, no, no. His mother finally noticed him. Her face was pale, her eyes red. Jake, baby, they're saying we should stay inside. They're saying it might be an invasion. The military is setting up checkpoints and... I have to go. Jake was already moving, grabbing his backpack from where he'd dropped it by the door. What? Jake, are you insane? There are alien ships in the sky. I know, Mom. I know. But I have to check on something. Someone. He was pulling on his shoes, his fingers clumsy with adrenaline. Jake Miller, you are not leaving this apartment. But Jake was already out the door, taking the stairs 2 at a time. His mother's protests faded behind him as he hit the street and started running. The town had descended into chaos. Cars clogged every street, horns blaring as people tried to evacuate or stock up on supplies or simply get to their families. Jake dodged through the panic, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Inside were 3 sandwiches, 2 bags of chips, and a pack of beef jerky he'd bought with the tip money his mother had left on the kitchen counter. He'd left an IOU note. He'd meant to pay her back with his next tutoring gig. Now he wondered if there would be a next anything. Military vehicles screamed past, heading toward the highway. Helicopters thundered overhead, tiny and useless looking compared to the massive shapes that blotted out the morning sun. People were crying, praying, arguing, looting. The end of the world had brought out every possible human reaction. Jake just ran. By the time he reached Riverside High, his lungs were burning and his legs felt like rubber. The school was empty, locked down by emergency order. Yellow tape blocked the entrances. But Jake didn't need to go inside. He needed the alley. He vaulted the fence by the parking lot and sprinted around the building to the dumpsters. His spot. His and Ash's spot. He skidded to a stop. 3 figures stood in the alley and they definitely weren't human. They were massive. 12 feet tall at least, maybe taller. Their bodies were covered in scales that seemed to catch and hold light, shimmering with colors that hurt to look at directly. Deep crimson, electric blue, molten gold. Their faces were angular and alien, with eyes that glowed like captured stars. They wore armor that looked like it was grown rather than forged, organic and metallic at the same time. Jake's courage evaporated. Every instinct screamed at him to run. These beings could crush him without effort. They looked like they'd stepped out of mythology, like dragons given humanoid form and dressed for war. One of them turned to face Jake. Its eyes, burning like twin suns, focused on him with an intensity that made his knees shake. Then, slowly, deliberately, the massive being knelt. The ground trembled slightly under its weight. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, like thunder rolling across mountains. But the words were perfect English, without any accent or hesitation. "Human child. We have waited for you." Jake couldn't find his voice. He stood there, clutching his backpack full of sandwiches and chips, facing down an alien warrior that could probably bite him in half. The being continued, its burning eyes never leaving Jake's face. "3 days ago, our prince crashed on your world. We tracked him to this location. We have watched and monitored his condition constantly. By the laws of our people, the ancient traditions of the Draconid Imperium, we were forbidden to intervene. The trial of survival must be faced alone or not at all. If our prince died here, the bloodline would choose another heir. This is our way. This has always been our way." Behind the three warriors, something moved in the shadows. Something much larger than a house cat. "But you," the warrior said, and there was something like wonder in that terrible voice, "you did what we could not. You showed mercy to a stranger. You fed him. Sheltered him. Returned to him each day. You, human child, have saved Prince Rylan, heir to the Draconid Imperium and future ruler of 6,000 worlds." The shape in the shadows stepped forward and Jake's heart stopped. Ash was no longer small. The creature had grown massive, the size of a school bus, with wings that scraped the walls of the alley when they twitched. Its scales blazed with inner fire, and those golden eyes, still the same golden eyes, looked at Jake with unmistakable affection. The warrior rose to his full height. "The fleet awaits your command, human child. 20,000 ships. 2 million warriors. Name your price for the life of our prince. Whatever you desire, it shall be yours." Jake Miller, 16 years old, poor kid from nowhere, stood in an alley behind his high school with a dragon the size of a bus and an alien empire waiting for his answer. And he had absolutely no idea what to say. The gymnasium at Riverside High had been transformed in less than 4 hours. Jake sat at a folding table that wobbled every time he moved, staring at a wall of screens that had been hastily mounted by military technicians. Each screen showed a different face, a different leader, a different language being translated in real time through earpieces that everyone wore. The President of the United States occupied the largest screen, her face grave and exhausted. Next to her, the UN Secretary General looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Prime ministers, presidents, kings and queens from every major nation filled the remaining screens. The most powerful people on Earth, all staring at Jake Miller, a kid who'd gotten his lunch money stolen just yesterday. Jake's hands were shaking under the table. He pressed them against his thighs, trying to stop the trembling. He was still wearing the same clothes from this morning, his sneakers were worn through at the toe, and his jacket had a stain on the sleeve from the cheap detergent his mom bought at the dollar store. He looked exactly like what he was, a poor kid who had no business being in this room. Around him stood the Draconid delegation. 5 of them now, each one massive and terrifying in their scale armor. Commander Thane stood directly behind Jake, close enough that Jake could feel the heat radiating from his body. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. These beings could end Earth without breaking a sweat, and everyone in this room knew it. Prince Rylan, still in his smaller form but already the size of a horse, lay beside Jake's chair. Occasionally the dragon would nuzzle Jake's arm, seeking comfort like the frightened creature Jake had found 3 days ago. It was the only thing keeping Jake from completely losing his mind. Commander Thane stepped forward, his voice filling the gymnasium with that resonant, thunderous quality. When he spoke, the translation software struggled to keep up, but his English was flawless. "Leaders of Earth, I will explain our ways so there is no misunderstanding. The Draconid Imperium has existed for 10 million of your years. We have conquered worlds, yes, but we have also protected thousands more from extinction. Our strength comes from tradition, from the trials that forge our rulers in fire and blood." One of the screens flickered. The Chinese premier leaned forward. "Get to the point. Why are you here? What do you want?" Thane's eyes glowed brighter, but his voice remained calm. "When our young come of age, they undergo the survival wander. They are taken to hostile worlds, worlds we have never visited, and left alone. No supplies. No weapons. No contact with their people. They must survive for 30 of your days using only their instincts and intelligence. Most die. This is expected. This is the price of leadership." "That's barbaric," someone said from one of the smaller screens. Jake thought it might be the Norwegian Prime Minister, but he wasn't sure. "Perhaps," Thane acknowledged. "But it has kept our empire strong for longer than your species has existed. 3 days ago, Prince Ryland's transport malfunctioned during his insertion. He crashed badly. His wing was shattered. He was bleeding internally. By our laws, ancient and absolute, we could only watch. We tracked him from orbit. We monitored his vital signs. We watched him crawl into this alley and begin to die. Jake felt sick. He'd known Ash Rylan was hurt, but hearing it described like this made it real in a horrible way. If the prince died, the bloodline would sense it and select another heir from among his siblings. This has happened 412 times in our recorded history. It is not a tragedy. It is simply our way. The Russian president spoke up, his voice harsh through the translator. Then why are you here? Why bring 20,000 warships to our planet? Thane turned his burning gaze to Jake. Because something unprecedented occurred. This human child found our prince. Fed him. Returned each day to care for him. Asked for nothing. Expected nothing. Your species is barely capable of interplanetary travel. You wage wars over resources we consider worthless. By our measures, you are primitive. And yet this child showed more honor than most spacefaring species we have encountered. The gymnasium fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of military vehicles outside. The American president spoke carefully, like someone defusing a bomb. Commander Thane, we appreciate that Jake showed kindness to your prince. But surely you understand that this puts Earth in an unusual position. You say there is a debt. That your fleet awaits Jake's command. What exactly does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. The boy saved the life of our future emperor. The debt is absolute. He may ask for anything within our power to grant, and we will grant it without hesitation or negotiation. That's when the shouting started. Technology sharing agreements, someone yelled. Weapons systems. We need defense capabilities. Medical advancements. Cures for cancer, for aging. Faster than light travel. The ability to reach other stars. The screens erupted into chaos. World leaders talking over each other, demanding, pleading, arguing about what Jake should ask for. Some wanted military might. Others wanted to leapfrog centuries of technological development. A few wanted resources, mining rights to asteroids, access to materials that didn't exist on Earth. Jake watched them argue like he wasn't even there. Like he was just a puppet they could control, words they could put in his mouth. His hands clenched into fists under the table. Commander Thane raised one massive hand and silence fell instantly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The debt is not to Earth. It is to the child. Only he may name the price. What say you, Jake Miller? What do you desire? Wealth beyond measure? Power over nations? Technology to make your species gods among the stars? Name it and it shall be yours. Every eye in the room focused on Jake. The screens. The warriors. Prince Rylan's golden gaze. The weight of the entire world pressing down on a 16-year-old kid who just wanted to stop being invisible. Jake stood up slowly. His chair scraped against the gym floor. He looked at the screens, at all those powerful faces expecting him to ask for weapons or warp drives or immortality. And then he said the only thing that mattered to him. I want you to help kids like me. The ones nobody sees. The ones who eat lunch alone behind dumpsters because they're too afraid to go to the cafeteria. I want you to make sure no kid anywhere feels invisible ever again. The silence that followed was absolute. Jake's voice trembled as he spoke, but his words came out clear and strong. He told them about kids just like him, the ones nobody noticed, the ones who ate lunch alone, the ones who dreaded Monday mornings. Every single school had them. While the world looked up at the stars with wonder and excitement, nobody seemed to care about the pain happening right in their own backrooms and bathroom stalls. I want something different, Jake said, his hands gripping the podium to steady himself. I want a program that connects human students with your people. Give these kids mentors. Give them someone who actually listens. Give them a reason to believe their lives matter to somebody somewhere out there. The massive chamber fell completely silent. You could hear people breathing. The alien diplomats looked at each other, their faces showing genuine confusion. Some of them had technology that could bend space and time. Others had conquered entire star systems. And here was this small human boy asking for something so simple it seemed almost ridiculous. Prince Rylan moved forward through the crowd. His disguise melted away like water, revealing his true form. He stood 20 feet tall, covered in silver scales that caught the light like mirrors. His eyes burned with something that looked like trapped starlight. Despite his size, his movements were gentle, almost careful. In 10,000 years, Rylan said slowly, his voice filling every corner of the room, we have made first contact with hundreds of species across the galaxy. Every single one asked for the same things. Weapons to destroy their enemies. Technology to make them powerful. Resources to make them rich. He paused, looking down at Jake with something that might have been respect. Your species is the first to ask for tools to save your own people. Not to conquer. Not to dominate. But to heal. The other aliens began talking among themselves in languages that sounded like music and static and thunder. Finally they turned back to face Jake. The Draconid Imperium's representative stepped forward, a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. We accept your terms, Jake Miller, the being said. We will create this program. We will send mentors to your world. We will show your young ones that the universe sees them, even when their own kind does not. The crowd erupted. Some people cheered. Others cried. Jake felt his legs go weak with relief. But Rylan wasn't finished. He knelt down, bringing his massive head level with Jake's. Up close, Jake could see that those starfire eyes held something ancient and wise and impossibly kind. I have a request of my own, Rylan said quietly, though everyone could still hear him. Other species sent their warriors and scientists to meet us. They sent their strongest, their smartest, their most impressive. But you are what makes humanity truly remarkable. Come with us, Jake Miller. Travel with our fleet. Show the galaxy what your species really is when you strip away all the noise and pretending. Jake's mind went blank. Go with them? Leave Earth? Leave his mom? You don't have to decide now, Rylan began, but Jake was already turning, scanning the crowd frantically. He found her near the back. His mother stood with her hands pressed against her mouth, tears running down her face in steady streams. Their eyes met across the distance. She was scared, he could see that. Terrified, actually. But she was also proud. So incredibly proud. She nodded once. A tiny movement that said everything. Go. What? Be brave. I'll be okay. Jake turned back to Rylan, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone must be able to hear it. This was insane. This was impossible. A month ago, his biggest worry was avoiding Tommy Chin in the hallway. Now he was standing in front of actual aliens about to leave the planet. Okay, Jake whispered. Then louder, stronger, okay. I'll go. The room exploded with noise again. Cameras flashed like lightning. People shouted questions. But Jake barely heard any of it. He was looking at his mother, trying to memorize her face, the way she smiled even through her tears. Rylan placed one massive claw gently on Jake's shoulder. You honor us, he said simply. And I promise you this, we will protect you as our own. You will return home safely. But first, you will help us understand what it means to be human. The real kind of human. Not the polished version your leaders show us. As Jake followed Rylan toward the massive alien ships waiting outside, he thought about all those kids back at his school. The ones who sat alone. The ones who heard in silence. Maybe he couldn't fix everything. Maybe this program wouldn't save everyone. But it was something. It was a start. And sometimes that's all anyone really needs, just someone somewhere saying, I see you. You matter. Keep going. 6 months passed like a dream Jake wasn't sure he'd ever wake up from. He stood on the bridge of the Imperium's flagship, a vessel so massive it had its own weather systems inside. Through the viewing window, Earth hung like a blue marble against the darkness, and Jake still couldn't believe this was his life now. He wore simple clothes, nothing fancy. The aliens had offered him elaborate uniforms and titles, but Jake refused. He was still just a kid from a broken-down apartment complex. Still the same person who used to hide in bathroom stalls during lunch period. The only difference now was that people actually listened when he spoke. His program, Invisible No More, had spread faster than anyone expected. What started as a simple idea had turned into something massive. 5 million human students were now connected with alien mentors from 12 different species. Kids who used to cry themselves to sleep now had someone reaching across the stars to tell them they mattered. Students who'd planned to end their pain permanently now talked excitedly about visiting other worlds someday. The messages flooded in daily. A girl from Norway who finally smiled again after months of darkness. A boy from Kenya who stopped cutting himself because his crystalline mentor showed him a reason to stay. Twins from Brazil who'd been each other's only friends now had an entire community supporting them. Every story hit Jake right in the chest, reminding him why he'd asked for this in the first place. Earth's governments had been skeptical at first. They'd wanted to negotiate for weapons, for faster-than-light travel, for fusion reactors and miracle cures. But the alien delegations kept coming back to the same point. They'd seen thousands of civilizations rise and fall. Technology didn't determine a species' worth. Character did. And humanity had shown something rare, the ability to care about suffering even when you're suffering yourself. So Earth joined the galactic community. Not because they had the biggest ships or the smartest scientists. Not because they could threaten or intimidate anyone, but because a poor kid from nowhere had shared his lunch with a dying stranger and asked for help saving people nobody else cared about. Back on Earth, things had changed in ways both big and small. Jake watched the news feed sometimes, when he had quiet moments between meetings with ambassadors and cultural exchanges. His face was everywhere now. Jake Miller, Earth's youngest ambassador. The boy who changed everything. At Riverside High, the hallways felt different. Teachers paid more attention. Students thought twice before shoving someone into a locker. The whole world was watching now, and nobody wanted to be the person who proved humanity didn't deserve its place among the stars. Tyler Reed sat in his basement, staring at his television screen. He watched Jake negotiate a trade agreement with the Harmonics, beings made of pure sound that had existed since before Earth's sun ignited. Jake spoke calmly, confidently, finding common ground between species that had nothing in common except a willingness to listen. Tyler remembered giving Jake that split lip. Remembered laughing while Jake's books scattered across the hallway floor. Remembered thinking he was strong because he could make someone else feel small. The shame sat in Tyler's stomach like a rock. He couldn't undo what he'd done. Couldn't take back the pain he'd caused. All he could do now was try to be better. He wasn't the only one. Across Earth, bullies looked at their victims differently now. Some apologized. Some just stopped. A few even started their own programs trying to make up for the damage they'd caused. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was something. In the alley behind Riverside High, where everything had started, a monument now stood. Bronze figures caught the sunlight, a thin boy kneeling beside a small dragon, offering a sandwich with both hands. Tourists came from across the world to see it. Some left flowers. Others left notes thanking Jake for giving them hope. The inscription at the base was simple, carved deep into the stone. Compassion needs no translation. Kindness requires no technology. Humanity's greatest weapon has always been refusing to let others suffer alone, even when we have nothing ourselves. Prince Ryland stood beside Jake on the bridge, his silver scales gleaming in the starlight. He'd become more than Jake's mentor. He was family now in the way that mattered most. Your people surprise us still, Ryland said quietly, watching Earth turn slowly below. Other species conquer through force. They dominate through fear. They spread through violence and subjugation. And humans? Jake asked, though he thought he knew the answer. Humans conquer with something far more dangerous, Ryland replied, a hint of amusement in his ancient voice. Hearts too stubborn to ignore pain, even in creatures that could destroy them. Empathy so fierce it crosses species barriers and language differences. You don't defeat your enemies with weapons, Jake Miller. You defeat them by refusing to let them become enemies in the first place. Jake looked down at Earth, at the tiny blue planet that held everyone he'd ever known. Somewhere down there, his mom was probably watching these same stars thinking about him. Somewhere, a lonely kid was messaging their alien mentor, finding reasons to smile. Somewhere, someone who'd felt invisible their whole life was finally being seen. We're not perfect, Jake said softly. We still hurt each other. We still have wars and hatred and cruelty. No species is perfect, Ryland agreed. But you're the first we've met who actively fights against your own darkness. Who builds programs to save those your society forgets. Who asks for help healing instead of weapons for hurting. He placed a gentle claw on Jake's shoulder. That's why the galaxy will remember humanity. Not for your technology or your strength, but for your stubborn, impossible kindness. Jake smiled, thinking about that day in the alley. About being too tired and hurt to care about consequences. About sharing the last good thing he had with someone who needed it more. Sometimes the smallest acts echo the loudest. Sometimes feeding a stranger changes the entire galaxy. And that's the truth about humanity, we don't conquer with firepower. We conquer with hearts that refuse to give up, even when giving up would be easier. That's why humanity stands among the stars now. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we're the ones who care enough to try.